Story of Chris Hadfield. Chris Hadfield was a very passionate storyteller and a great presenter. Chris Hadfield presented a TED Talk back in 2014, and when he presented his talk at TED Talk, he received massive standing ovation from the audience because of his excellent storytelling skills. Chris developed his storytelling skills from his school when he used to be at a school, and he over time developed his storytelling skills from one of his teacher who gave him the ideas how to present a great story so that it is impactful, simple, and message gets across amongst the audience easily. Therefore, Chris started working on his presentation skills and sharing his ideas since beginning. And he was very passionate to see the moon with his own eyes. When Neil Armstrong, the first astronaut who went on the moon in 1969, set foot on July 20, 1969. At that time, Chris was only 9-year-old child. When he saw the visuals on television, he was so fascinated with those visuals and amazing stories coming out of space and and something that the marvels of human achievement that the first time any human has set foot on the moon. Therefore, there was a strong burning desire was developing in Chris that he should also become an astronaut. However, at that time, Chris, when the Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, 9-year-old Chris was watching the event in a small cottage on, in the name of the that small cottage of village was Stag Island, which is based in Ontario. I'm also simultaneously looking at my notes because I do not remember the names of those places and such as dates I mentioned earlier, July 20, 1969. So he was inspired to become an astronaut at that time, and he believed astronauts were the coolest guys ever because they are seeing the moon with their own eyes, which can be the dream of millions of people, millions and billions of people, and there are few who get the opportunity because of their sheer hard work to reach onto this space and see the moon. Therefore, Chris have wanted to become the astronaut. Unfortunately, it seemed like insurmountable challenge for Chris. Why? Because when Chris have wanted to join the Canadians, wanted to become astronaut, at that time there was no Canadian space program, and it seemed like Chris had no chance of ever becoming an astronaut. However, in the year of 1992, Canadian Space Agency announced its space program, and Chris, along with more than 5,000 people, applied for selection after Sifting through process, Chris was amongst the 500 applicants who were shortlisted. Later on, Chris was among just merely 20 candidates who were shortlisted in the second round. And those who were shortlisted, they were sent to Ontario, and they had to undertake one of the mock press conferences. And the purpose of that exercise, of that assessment, was that they are astronauts or the ambassadors of the space program, and they have to be great storytellers so that they are selling out their program to the Canadian citizens. So that, and the reason in hindsight is understandable, because they have because the astronauts have to sail that program so that there is a massive wider public acceptance to the program. After all, it is the taxpayers money that will be utilized in the space program. And definitely there can be some challenges. There is also the risk. The program must have been running the risk at that stage. If it's failure, if it fails, then the government has to face the public, give them a hope. It's not the end, it's just a new beginning, a beginning towards a great destination. So the astronauts, along with Chris and various other astronauts who are still undergoing selection process, they have to undertake a mock press conference and tell the story in such a way so that it has an impact, it has wider public acceptance. And Chris was selected, and he was probably amongst the first Canadians to go onto the space and see the moon, and his dream came true. When Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, that was nearly impossible for Chris to realize his dream, as it was for the Americans before John F. Kennedy when he started the space program. And when Chris Hadfield was in the space, he made a video from his face and shared on Twitter. It was so awe-inspiring that by the time he landed in Kazakhstan, the video had more than 1 million views on Twitter because he made that story from his face, and that had received wider public recognition and has a massive viewership. So Chris is an inspiring human being, and also he is a great presenter. When he presented his TED talk to presented his TED talk in 2014, he received massive standing ovation from the public. And Chris utilized 35 images from from his presentation day, PowerPoint day. However, from those presentations, there was no text included, and his words were complemented by those visuals in the presentation day. And when he presented his talk and simultaneously was running those slides, it had a massive impact on public, which has added more value to his storytelling skills, and he became very popular amongst the TED speakers. and Chris continues to become a public presenter, and he's a very inspiring character worth visiting his journey that he started from when he was 9 years old in uh, in Ontario, from a small village which at that time seemed an impossible dream to come true. However, his passion came to fruition and he became an astronaut and visited the space. What an awe-inspiring story of Chris Hadfield.